A warm welcome to the Accra SDG Investment Fair, which is happening virtually this year. And welcome to a session and a conversation which promises to throw more light on how we are dealing with COVID as far as the SDGs are concerned. My name is Bernard Avle. I'm a radio and TV host at City FM and City TV in Ghana. And we're privileged to have a very special guest for the conversation. She's the ambassador and permanent representative of the Republic of Ghana to the United Nations, a position she's held since July 2015. As a career diplomat since 1989, she's held various positions in the Ghana Foreign Ministry and served in different capacities in Ghana missions in Moscow, Geneva, Tel Aviv, Washington, and Pretoria. During her time at the UN, she's performed special assignments including Chair of the Advisory Committee for the United Nations Program of Assistance in Teaching, Study, Dissemination, and Wider Appreciation of International Law since July 2015. She's also been the Chair of the UN Population Awards Committee between 2016 and 2018, and she was appointed by presidents of the 70th and 71st sessions of the General Assembly as co-advisor on enhancing the participation of indigenous people and institutions in the relevant meetings of the UN bodies between February 2016 and September 2017. Additionally, she served as the chair of the African Group of Ambassadors in New York in December 2017 and was vice president of the 71st session of the UN General Assembly from September 2017 to September 2018. Now, she has so many accomplishments and we are so privileged to have her on the program. By way of background, she holds a degree in English and philosophy from the University of Ghana and a Master of Arts in Development Studies with specialization in women and development from the Institute of Social Studies, The Hague, Netherlands. She also has diplomas in public admin and multilateral diplomacy from GIMPA in Ghana. Ambassador Mrs. Martha Amai-Chan-Pobi, it is a joy to have you on the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your words of welcome. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great to have you. What do you do at the UN? I mean, we know the role, but it seems like you are very busy. So many things you've done in such a short time.
Yes, it's a busy place. Actually, the United Nations keeps the multilateral system oiled and well rolling. And so it's a time where you need to engage. You need to engage actively. And Ghana has had a leadership position on many issues. So as ambassador, the role is to maintain that image, to do more in terms of representing Ghana's interests at the multilateral forum very well, in a way that will inure to benefits for our country. So that's what we've been doing here with a team, a marvelous team of officers that I have. We've been championing Ghana's cause at the United Nations.
Wow. I'm sure working with the UN, you've seen a lot of things in your life. Where are we globally with the way COVID has disrupted the world since March, I think? I mean, what are your thoughts on the whole world situation with COVID and the kind of disruption it's caused?
Well, 2020 has been a particularly difficult year with the COVID pandemic. As we know, it's had a devastating impact across borders. No national sovereignty is respected here. And it has also led to a disruption of systems as we know it. International travel, global supply chains, livelihoods, education, industry, business. They've all been negatively impacted, not to mention the loss in terms of human lives and the health scare that we've all had. And so we couldn't have envisaged its impact. Of course, pandemics come and go. But interestingly enough, the international community this year happens to be the 75th anniversary of the founding of the United Nations. And we've already been engaged in discussing the impact, the effect, or how the UN is seeking to fulfill its obligations in terms of the mandate it has. We have the pursuit of international peace and security. We have advancing human rights. we have advancing sustainable development. And so in the discussion of the organization at its 75th anniversary, this COVID pandemic has even brought deeper questions as to why this has happened at this time. It is also a time that we usually look at multilateralism. And you know, multilateralism has been weakened to some extent in recent years. The Paris Agreement on climate change was adopted, but we've had some countries withdrawing from the agreement. In the area of non-proliferation of nuclear weapons, we've had some setbacks, and in the area of health security as well, and trade issues. So multilateralism is being challenged. COVID happens. We have our 75th anniversary. How are we going to take the organization forward? And we've been engaged in discussions here in New York. The whole international community, I believe, is keen on ensuring that the organization is well placed to do better. So in short, let me say that it's a very challenging time for the global system, and there's a real keen interest in ensuring that we do this right. And in addressing the COVID pandemic, we do it in a way that will be greener, that will be more sustainable, that will also inure to the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals.
Brilliant. I'm sure we'll come back to the subject of multilateralism later in the conversation. But briefly, what do you suppose the major impacts of COVID has been on social and economic aspects of our lives?
Well, in the first place, I mentioned that it has claimed the lives of more than 500,000 people across the globe. That is devastating enough. Then you have countries with already weak systems, health systems, greatly challenged in meeting the health needs of their populations. Then you have the issue also of the economy, the impact on the economy. It has slowed economic growth considerably. The World Bank and the UN statistics indicate that in 2020, global GDP will decline sharply by 3.2%. And we have about 55 to 60 million people who could be pushed into extreme poverty. And so you also have a situation of children facing malnutrition, the ricochet effect of all of this. Unemployment, extreme poverty, children are impacted negatively, food security is seriously challenged. And then you have livelihoods. You see, if you look at the number of people in the informal sector, for instance, in Ghana, we have so many people who are engaged from day to day. Their work is what feeds them. So across the globe, you have about a total of 1.6 billion people, as estimated by the ILO, who have risked their jobs, who have lost their livelihoods, and these are people in the informal sector. Clearly, they are impacted upon. Education has suffered greatly. We have about 90% of the global student population greatly hampered by school closures, and an even greater risk of the generational inequality. Some of the students, through unequal access to the technology that is now being used to, organize classes for school children, without the necessary ICT technology availability. Clearly, some children are not going to be covered by this. Then you have issues of domestic violence because of the lockdown and people having to stay home. Those categories, and I would like to mention here women, who often are the victims of domestic violence or sexual-based gender violence, are also negatively impacted upon. So it's a situation where, for instance, you're locked in with your molester, or the one who beats you, have to lock down with that person. So you can imagine what this means in terms of the gains we've made in the area of protecting women and children from violence. And so there are other issues of vulnerability, lack of access to water, sanitation, clean energy, and I've already mentioned ICT. These are all social impacts from the COVID pandemic and the economic impact of it. So they are very challenging. They're very challenging for every country. And we're seeing how gradually we can move on addressing these. Of course, at the national level, a lot is being done, but also at the global level, we're looking at how the policies can be shaped to support in terms of policy advice, and whether there are initiatives that can be taken at the level of the organization through the UNDP, through UNICEF, some of the funds and agencies, how they can support member states to deliver effectively on addressing the social challenges that we are facing.
So let's talk about the Sustainable Development Goals. I noticed a very interesting coincidence that we got the SDGs in 2015, and that coincides with your appointment as the ambassador and permanent rep for Ghana. So at least you have a nice coincidence of 5 years in this role, 5 years of SDGs. What are the SDGs? How do they work as a starter? Give us some SDG 101. Then we can jump into the effects of COVID on these SDGs.
All right. So the SDGs, as we know, are a set of goals and targets that were developed by member states. I think that there was a whole lot of national inputs into this process. They were adopted in 2015, and they are supposed to be the overarching framework for development that will ensure equality, bridge gaps, ensure no one is left behind in terms of how we advance where we want to be as societies. We want to grow together in the realization that where one part of the society is not doing well, it means the entire society is not doing. So they promote prosperity of peoples. They are to protect the planet also. So it covers people's prosperity, planet, protecting the planet, and they are very people-centered. Now, the first goal on poverty. For instance, you see one thing about the SDGs, they are very well interconnected. And at the adoption of this framework for development, it was forcefully, the point was forcefully made that we should not deal with them in isolation. They should be dealt with together. And so we looked at ways of avoiding having to treat them in silos, which meant that quite often agencies that deal with one sector sometimes do not look at how the other sector is being worked out. So it's encouraged that member states need to implement the SDGs as a whole. And in fact, Ghana provides an excellent example of how we've done this by, under the auspices of the Ministry of Planning, having a multi-sectoral committee that discusses SDG implementation across the different sectors. Because, for instance, if you just take the health crisis as we have it, it's affecting livelihoods and therefore poverty. So already from the health, that's goal 3, you're talking about goal 1. Already livelihoods, that's decent work and economic growth falls under goal 8. So once the health is negatively impacted, then you have a ripple effect in several other of the goals, and you will begin to erode the successes and the gains that have been made in those specific goals. So you need to have a very holistic view of the implementation of the SDGs. And this pandemic, I think, has shown how interlinked they are. And then we're talking about water. I mentioned that recently. Ghana, when it happened, we had to have the ability to wash hands. It's not every community that has pipe-borne water, and therefore you have to innovate to find ways to provide the sanitation and the water that you can use to curb the spread of the disease. So it also shows you the link that you must have across different sectors.
Now, Ambassador, I noticed in not just the Ghanaian media, but even in global media, there's a lot of talk about why we need to increase health investments, hospitals, PPEs, medicines, and things like this. Now, what are the risks of doing this without cognizance of what you've just said? If all governments started saying, well, we have a pandemic, so let's quadruple the health budget and let's just take care of people's health first. What are some of the risks that such an approach, if not nuanced, could have on the attainment of these goals?
Yes, having said that health, is, of course, is paramount, you are right. The discussion is that if you just focus on provision of the health facility, yes, you're going to take care of people's health. But at the same time, like in some societies, the discussion was that if I'm hungry and I can't eat, then I might as well die. You know, so we've had such extreme points being raised. But seriously, it slowed down manufacturing. Industries are affected. It slowed down the service sector considerably. There are scarcities, price surges in primary goods, and so on. Now, it has also affected domestic resource mobilization. And so quite apart from the health sector, you're finding that government is unable to use the limited resources to cover all the other areas. So there's a need to have that broad approach in tackling it. We cannot just focus on the health. But also, I want to say that this is where you need all sectors of society joining hands to help, because governments alone with limited budgets cannot do this. And therefore, you need a strong representation of the private sector. We're talking about also internationally, looking at ways that more revenues, there are shortfalls in revenues. And therefore, you want the international monetary and financial institutions to come on board. We need systemic changes that will release, will enhance global liquidity issues so that developing countries can have access to much needed revenues. There are countries that are in debt and they have to service their debts. So providing the health facility and just focusing on that, you're going to have a challenge because you have other obligations you must fulfill. And so it is a cross-dimensional approach that we must have. Otherwise, recovery will be difficult. The health thing is immediate response. You must provide the facilities, of course, but you must recover after that. After that, you have to continue the business of governance in your country, ensuring that you're back to where you were. And therefore, we can't wait to do that later. It has to be done in tandem with addressing the health crisis also.
Interesting. This is the Accra SDG Investment Fair. Our panel is looking at the socioeconomic impact of COVID-19 on the SDGs. My name is Bernard Avle, and our resource person is Ambassador and Permanent Rep of the Republic of Ghana to the UN, Excellency Martha Ama Echan-Pobi. So far, we've been given a crash program on SDGs. We've also been educated on why a tunnel vision is not the best way to go. I think to end, I want you to do two things for me. In which areas have we seen some reversals? I think you hinted to some of this, but I want you to elaborate a bit more. In which areas have we seen reversals in the attainment of these goals, particularly for the African side of things, if you want? And then what strategies would you recommend we use to overcome these reversals and secure our future?
Well, there are quite a number of them. Some of the goals are very obvious that we are suffering there. We have regressed a little bit. There are others that we are not too sure yet. They are yet to be assessed in terms of the impact, because as you know, the COVID pandemic is still ongoing. Now, I would mention SDG 1, that is the area of poverty eradication. Current estimations indicate there's a downward trend in that, and I've already explained that. Secondly, hunger, that's SDG 2, zero hunger. The economic slowdown and supply chain disruptions have in some way exacerbated food insecurity. And I just want to mention also, you know, for us in Africa, where we have, in Ghana, for instance, we have the nutrition needs of children. School-going children will be given one hot meal a day, a nutritious meal. So if the child is unable to go to school, then you have a situation where that source of nutrition is lost to the child. And so definitely there's some element of negative impact there. Health and well-being, SDG 3, clearly this is a health pandemic, and so we see the challenge that it has posed for health workers, for the insufficient health systems. Public health care has suffered. The mortality rate that we've recorded is a significant regress in terms of how well we wanted to perform by this date. In the area of education, again, school closures have affected virtually every country. In Africa, it's been devastating. And I talked about the lack of access to ICT technology that would have enabled the children to be schooled from home. We have lots of inequalities there. Some children have, others don't have that facility. And therefore, SDG 4, some of the targets have also suffered. In the area of decent work and economic growth, I talked about the informal sector. Usually workers, factory workers who cannot go. It's been immense on also that front. So these are the SDGs that I can say have seen clear reversals in their progress. There are others that have been affected, but we are yet to assess to see exactly to what extent.
So what should our response be? I think this is the real question, which I think we brought you here to answer. Give us a clear path to deal with these reversals in a sustainable way to secure our collective future.
All right. The first thing I'd like to say is that the answer lies in the same SDGs.
Okay.
So the SDGs are the framework for sustainable development. We should believe in them. We should continue to work on their holistic implementation. So the response and recovery also lies in the SDGs. That's the first one. And now the next thing is to look at the coming decade. Actually, this is the decade for accelerated action and delivery of the SDGs between 2020 and 2030. We have the decade to do that. And this decade should see a number of actions. First of all, I want to emphasize the area of financing. And I guess this investment fair is exactly trying to do that. We need to enhance domestic mobilization of resources. And I think the government of Ghana is doing excellent in that sphere through ICT, through reform, or, structural reforms in the tax systems and so on. So that's all very well. We need to continue to do that effectively. We need in that also to address issues of the illicit financial flows, which is something that at the international level we are engaged with, because the international community is telling us that the financing we need should be raised domestically. And if at the same time, African countries are losing on the average of between $50 to $100 billion annually through illicit financial flows, then, I mean, this amount is, what we need, what is actually coming in terms of FDI inflows and official development assistance is just a pittance compared to what is going out. So we need to look at that because without the financing, I believe that all the talk we are talking will not get us there. And so that's another thing. We need to also build on our past experiences as member states, as countries, and help us to recover better. Those areas where we've made gains, we need to go back there and see how we can quicken that pace to correct to make up for what we've lost. And I think Ghana has good examples to use in the way that we've advanced so far. Every year, I think there's some kind of assessment we do, the voluntary national reviews of how member states are engaged in implementing the SDGs. And there are lots of lessons learned. We can take these lessons and the experiences shared by other countries to build on ours. So there's that store of knowledge and experience that countries can have access to using the UN system. Then we need more global solidarity. And then I'll also come to the national level. We need the national solidarity as well. And all hands on deck, the private sector needs to be there. And I think that in terms of helping them recover, Ghana, the government can help sectors or companies that have suffered, because they are the engine of growth, as we know. And the more they are able to recoup and rebound, employment will go up and all the other ripple effect that we expect to happen. Of course, I mentioned that we need a revitalized global partnership for development, and we need to push hard because it's not going to come easy. At the World Bank, IMF, at the UN, in all our engagements, we should be very, very vocal. We should be, we need to push. And this is what we've experienced here. It's not easy for them to just give up, give in to our demands. And so we need to work in tandem with other countries. We have different groups. We have the African group, we have the G77, we have the non-aligned countries. These are all, they give us the leverage, which we have to use to get the right global economic conditions that are conducive for us to advance our own socio-economic development. So these are areas where we must, we should not underestimate the impact of, and we must actually use to enhance our ability to achieve our targets with the Sustainable Development Goals.
Wow. Now, you've made me enjoy the SDGs because they seemed very big to me, but you sort of broken it down pretty nicely. So we'll take a short break. Thank you. We will now bring in the audience because I do believe there are questions from all over. So thank you very much, Excellency Martha Amechampobi, for your initial thoughts. And then when we come back, we'll take some questions from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bernard.
Brilliant. So welcome back to the session. Good evening, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining from. This is still the session on SDGs. And I noticed that we just took a quick poll, and I'm sure the results will be shared pretty shortly. Welcome back to the sessions. I'm sure we enjoyed Ambassador Pobi's initial thoughts. And there you have it. So, well, the media is only 3%. That's not a good sign. Entrepreneurs, 19%. Then the government dominates almost 40% from what I'm seeing here. And so, and then other 20%. So, we want to urge participants to share their questions, and to make it easy, you can type your questions in the chat box, and I'll be happy to read them because I'm sure Ambassador is also here with us. So if you have any questions for Ambassador following that brilliant submission, please feel free to type them in the chat box, which is below. It's at the bottom of your screen, and we'll be happy to read them. Let me just be sure Ambassador is still here with us. And Ambassador Pobi, good to see you again. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Bernard. I'm here.
So a week is a long time in politics, but I'm sure in a COVID pandemic, it's a very short time. So tell me whether all the points you made earlier are still valid today as a way of picking up the Q&A session, because so much happens within the period. You made some key points about SDGs should not be treated in silos. We need a cross-dimensional approach. the answer is not in the stars, it's still in the SDGs. Just any general thoughts a week or so after we spoke earlier.
Yes, thank you very much, and good to see all the participants. And I also want to use this opportunity to say how impressive. I really enjoyed the statements that were made by the speakers at the opening session, because they really very well, they delved into it, the issues. We had the UN resident coordinator, and I was very pleased to hear from him as well. Indeed, a week, as you said, is a long time, but I fear that in the COVID era, it's not long enough. We still have the challenge. Of course, today happens to be the first day of the 75th session of the UN General Assembly. Perhaps that's what the only change is, that we've moved from the 74th to the 75th, and we're all geared up to seeing how this session is going to advance the important work of addressing this pandemic, addressing development, addressing our collective security as a planet, if I may put it that way. But much of what I said, I think, still remains very valid even today.
Okay, we have a question from Lesotho, but before I get to that question, by way of just the freshness, there's a good coincidence. As we're speaking, there's an important ECOWAS summit chaired by Ghana's president. So in a sense, multilateralism is not that dead. But I still feel you need to elaborate a bit on what you said about multilateralism, because during COVID, a lot of countries adapted nationalistic approaches to dealing with the pandemic. Can we say that multilateral diplomacy is losing its relevance at all in the way we dealt with the pandemic?
The first reaction is that no, it's not. And you've said it rightly, that faced with the threat and impact of COVID-19, the instinct of many countries was to go it alone, and even more were left to fend for themselves. But I think that possibly we would have paid not such a high price if we had acted in unison from the very onset. That goes to underscore the importance of working together on problems. Global problems require global responses. Now, many countries, including us here, Ghana being represented here by the mission, are looking at the possibility that, or the opportunities that the COVID-19 pandemic presents us. Is this an open moment for the next years, how to galvanize and mobilize political will towards enhancing international cooperation? Because it is the need to strengthen the framework for our collaboration is critical. We have to re-energize multilateralism, the UN being one of the core organizations where we can realize this. We need to develop mechanisms, strengthen those mechanisms that can address global challenges. Because now we have COVID-19, but we still have looming challenges in the climate space, for instance. And if we don't improve upon how we cooperate as nations of the world, we will not be able to meet these challenges. So we see the world as a global commons. We see collective security being expressed beyond wars, like you have the crisis in Mali. Beyond those, our collective security is also seen in the climate, is seen in pandemics, and how to address this, we have to do through international cooperation. So I think that the question is now looking at how do we develop or how do we build or re-energize the organization to be more effective? And so we are discussing these issues, and hopefully with the spirit of the 75th anniversary of the founding of the United Nations, we should be able to enhance how we work, because every country has suffered. The pandemic has shown us that we are in it together. We fail together, we win together. So we need to begin to respect our national sovereignty, the fact that a stronger regard for the rules, the rules that engage, the rules of engagement within the international sphere is important, and treating each other with respect so that we can work together towards our collective security.
Thank you. Let me read a couple of questions and see what you do with them. So Apollos Ambrose has a question, and he says, "Hi, Ambassador. Hi, Bernard. What are some practical on-the-field blessings in disguise associated with the pandemic for the Ghanaian in Ghana, Africa, and the world at large?" Let me repeat. What are some practical on-the-field blessings in disguise associated with the pandemic for the Ghanaian in Ghana, Africa, and the world at large? And then there's a second one from Collins Amoako Oforiata, who wants to know, Ambassador, what is the UN plan for online learning systems for students in remote African countries? So blessings in disguise, and then UN response for online learning in remote African countries. Ambassador.
Thank you. I like the concept of blessings in disguise. You know, in every situation, challenging situation, we have opportunities. They give us opportunities, and that is exactly what we need to tap into. Indeed, you know, one of the key things, and what we're doing now, this very investment fair, we're doing it virtually, and we've been forced, as it were, to look at possibilities for engagement. And this, as I said, it's in the area of education, businesses are working. There were new ways of working, which sometimes, you know, I realize are cost effective. For instance, now no member state is coming to New York for the General Assembly. For the first time, our heads of state are going to address the General Assembly from the capitals. So looking at all that these represent, that we are able to function in a different kind of way. Maybe we need to look at the sustainability of these things. We talk about climate change. We noticed when the aircrafts were not flying in the air and all the pollution, I remember seeing video clips of animals and birds and you know, like nature is also revamping a little bit. It is an effect of the pandemic. We all had to stay home. There was a lockdown. There were no movements. But nature also had a way of also recouping on the damage that we've inflicted on nature. So we've been talking about greener recovery. This is an opportunity. So how we build back better, we should ensure that we're doing so in a greener fashion and addressing other potential challenges, like, you know, in terms of the climate. So this is a blessing, I think, in disguise, because it is opening our eyes to what we could do more efficiently with at less cost, possibly, how we need to tackle our health sector. For instance, lots of countries are putting up health structures. Ghana, we have you know, the emergency, the way the private sector rallied around, and we put up, you know, that amazing structure to deal with infectious diseases and such pandemics. That was an opportunity to galvanize and to mobilize for this. So these, I see them as blessings in disguise for countries like ourselves and for Africa. Self-reliance, it taught us that we should begin to really take that self-reliance policy seriously, you know. And so when this happens and every country is looking to themselves, what is Africa able to do for itself? And we saw that even within ECOWAS, there was a rallying around to see in terms of the PPEs that were being distributed, even in the area of vaccine research, Africa is doing its own work. And so these are just examples that I wish to share with them. It's called Apollos, that these are what I see as blessings in the field that we need to tap into. Now, with regards to the UN plan for online learning, these are all contained in a policy paper, which I would recommend to all. They are available on the UN websites, and it takes into consideration, again, the lessons that we've learned from this process, that we can enhance distance learning a great deal. Of course, there's a need to tap into digital resources that are available. There's a need to also enhance the connectivity, internet connectivity, communication infrastructure in our countries. And these policy recommendations are there. The UN has taken the step of preparing studies on the basis of several events and several documentation that already exists in the system to present these options to member states. And I think that a lot is available there that, of course, we have the UN resident coordinator with us, hopefully, and they can give pointers as to how we can tap into what is available on this very important area to enhance education.
Thank you. We have some questions which are very finance heavy. And I guess because the finance ministry in Ghana has brought us together, we should take them. But I do know your role does not directly deal with some of these, but I'm going to read the questions anyway, and you do with them what you can. So Motai Ramokoinili from Lesotho says, what measures did Ghana apply to eliminate illicit financial flows? Because you made reference to them earlier. What measures did Ghana apply to eliminate illicit financial flows so as to improve resource mobilization domestically? This is Motai's question. Measures Ghana took to eliminate IFF to reduce them. Then there's a question which is more like a proposal from Charles Apiedu. It's basically proposing a welfare payment of 100 Ghana cedis to every adult in Ghana every month to alleviate poverty, a goal of the SDG. And he's asking your opinion on this, particularly because you said poverty eradication and hunger were two areas of key concern. So Mr. Apiedu has a proposal for you. 100 cedis to every adult in Ghana every month to alleviate poverty. What do you think?
Thank you. Let me tackle the first question on illicit financial flows. You know, this is a phenomenon that the international community is still grappling with. We in Africa have done extensive work. You remember the Thabo Mbeki panel that did extensive research in all of Africa and came to the conclusion that there were significant amounts of money that were being illegally siphoned off the continent. And the subject has grown. Now it has been internationalized. It is now an issue at the UN. This year, the president of the General Assembly and the president of ECOSOC jointly commissioned what we call the FACTI panel. And this is a panel that has been set up to provide research papers to delve into the issue of this phenomenon of illicit financial flow. And they have been briefing us in the course of this session on where they've got to. And the outcome of these consultations and research they've done is significant because we now need to take it to the next step. You talk about Ghana, but Ghana, on our own, maybe I can attempt to say that when it comes to domestic resource mobilization, through the use of digital technology that is being applied by the Ghana Revenue Authority, we've been able to eliminate not too much human intervention. Though. These are just the area of taxes and so on. That's just a peanut compared to the other ways in which the monies flow out of the continent. We're talking about tax evasion, tax avoidance on a massive scale. And the issue of even where a country declares its profits. So for instance, a company produces, and you have a lot of it in the extractive industries, the mining sector and so on. Where is the point of production? That is where the taxes should be imposed. But if you ship the goods there and you go to Europe and you go and declare your profits there, that's where you're taxed there. Now, we don't benefit from those revenues that could help us also to use by way of domestic resource mobility. So there are other ways that we are tackling it. We're also thinking in terms of a global framework for taxes. Currently, the UN, there's no international tax organization. So that issue is not being dealt with in a comprehensive way and involving all countries. It's not just OECD or Europe or Americas. We all must have a say in how we define, how we set the norms for international taxation, because those are the ways that we can effectively address the challenge. Now, on the welfare payment, I don't think I can dare a comment on that, Mr. Apiedru. It is, these cash payments, yes, they are cash payments, but cash payments go to the most vulnerable in society. I think we have criteria in Ghana where we address like single female-headed households that have, a lot of disability or old age, and they are unable to provide for the family. So yes, cash dispensation, dispensing cash like that is good for certain categories, the very vulnerable, to enable them just to meet day-to-day survival. But I would not imagine that every Ghanaian ought to be given this amount, because frankly, not every Ghanaian needs it in the first place. But we need to actually look at the whole thing about the SDGs is that leaving no one behind. So we are trying to fill the gaps. We have to bridge the gaps and reduce inequality. And that is the focus that we should be looking at, and not just dispensing monies to everybody. So that's just my 2 pence on that.
We are in campaign mode in Ghana, and if you had said you agreed, I would have voted for you. We have a couple of questions. So this one is from Esther Emanuela Spew, and she says, "Hi, Ambassador. Please, what is the UN going to do different in its operations post-COVID? What were the key learnings from COVID for the UN?" So that's Esther's questions. Key learnings from COVID, what are you doing different? Then Akwesi Sapong from Ulti Foundation has a question on culture. And he says, how can we leverage culture in these challenging times to reduce youth extremism and violence, as incidentally, today marks International Day for Democracy, in collaboration with youth-led organizations at the grassroots level. So it's a big one. How can we leverage culture in these challenging times to reduce youth extremism and violence, as today marks International Day for Democracy, in collaboration with youth-led organizations? So, Ambassador.
Okay, thank you. Let me start from the question on culture. It's a very important issue that he's raised. More and more, we see that, last year we had the Asantehene address the General Assembly on the role of our traditional systems on culture in peace building. And we have to leverage the good things that we have. The youth, of course, we see them in Africa. We are blessed with a large population of young people. We must be able to reap the demographic dividend from having these people, but that involves deliberate policies that will get them into jobs, that will also help them to, we must listen, not just listen, but we must engage them actively in the development process. We engage them in peace, on peace issues. If you look at the conflicts around the world, particularly in Africa, you look at just the Sahel, around the Lake Chad area, the lake has virtually dried up. The livelihoods around there are not there. Young people do not see any hope for change. They are driven into violent extremism, and there are all these people around or organizations that are indoctrinating such people, getting them into these negative acts. So there's a very important job to be done to address the youth in a way that we engage them positively, and through innovation, through whatever means at the macroeconomic level that will enhance their role in development, we need to engage. Culture, yes, we have various good aspects, excellent aspects of our culture that we should also use to enhance their role in these processes. It's not such a straightforward answer. I'm not sure whether I've actually provided the answer that he's looking for, but we sometimes talk about a culture of peace. We talk about, so if you're talking about culture and it's in terms of our traditional systems, way of life, and so on, yes, it is good. Our traditional leaders are already engaged at the very local level, at the grassroots level, but we need to really see how much more effectively that we can enhance peace through the cultural mechanisms that we have. Now, Esther asked a question about what the UN is seeking to do differently. And in the light of COVID, I think I already said that this is a moment when we have to scrutinize our collective problem-solving capacity. If this COVID-19 has provided us such an opportunity, that we need to see how we can realize the vision of the UN Charter more effectively. So we also, when we take the United Nations agenda, you see that there's a whole lot of issues. For 75 years, we've been adding on. The agenda is unwieldy, it is long. Sometimes even member states, we don't even understand why certain issues remain on the agenda of the organization. And I have been part of a process that is saying, look, let us review the organizational working methods. How do we work better? Because there are priority areas, serious issues that we need to focus and spend time on. But we spend time on so many things that sometimes the private, not the private sector, civil society organizations, the general public, because the UN is about we the people. If the people do not see the impact of what the UN does in their lives, then we begin to lose relevance. And so there's a serious discussion on how to fine-tune our working methods, looking at the agenda of the organization, rationalizing some of the issues so that we can deliver better. We can make the organization more fit for purpose, avoiding fragmentation and proliferation of issues, and allowing member states to focus their efforts on the most important issues. We are also looking at how global governance should go. It's not, yes, it's a member state-led organization, it's a government organization, but governments clearly cannot do this alone. We increasingly realize, and particularly with the COVID-19 pandemic, that we must work with other stakeholders. I already mentioned the private sector earlier, and civil society organizations. So we have lots of non-state actors who must be brought on board, and the organization must make room for them. Currently, they are only able to participate in the Economic and Social Council, where some have got consultative status. The General Assembly is very difficult to get a civil society organization to participate at the General Assembly. And it's a challenge trying to change the mindset of member states to enable us tap into the strong points that and the capabilities that some of the different non-state actors bring into the conversation. So we want to do things differently. It's a process. 193 countries, you have to get everybody to agree. And imagine, even in a family of 6, you have challenges. So if you have 193, it takes a long time to make that change. But we are getting there gradually. We must continue to have the confidence and to support confidence in the organization and to support the changes that need to take place.
Thank you so much. We know it's a tough job, but somebody has to do it. And we're really proud of what you're doing for Africa at the UN and particularly for Ghana, Ambassador. There are lots of questions coming in. KK Jan from Ghana Infrastructure Fund. I really have to apologize because we have to wrap up now to segue into the next session. So there are other sessions that would hopefully be able to take the questions you have. So the others, Elizabeth, Mantibia, KK Jan, I've seen your questions. Sorry, I didn't read them earlier. But I want to say a big thank you to you, Ambassador Martha Pobi. It's been a real joy listening to you these past few hours. You are Ghana's ambassador and permanent rep at the UN. And my name is Bernard Abbe. I'm a radio and TV journalist at TTFM. Thank you all. I'm crossing over to Jerry Ajololo, who's the MC or moderator for the main session, to continue. So thank you. Please stay with us.